Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Jedd Fisch, the Washington Huskies, continue to fill it up in the 2025 class, landing another massive commitment late last night, coming from four-star athlete Dylan Robinson from the state of California. And we want to talk about two different things. One, Dylan Robinson, a fascinating prospect from the state of California that two-way football player at the high school level could legitimately play wide receiver or cornerback at the collegiate level. This is one of those kids that you just want to bet on, right? 6'3", 190, extremely smooth mover. From a pure athletic profile standpoint, this kid has a ton of juice, a ton of potential. But I think the more fascinating conversation for us to dive into is, what Washington is doing on the recruiting trail with Jedd Fisch, who hasn't even coached a snap for this Washington Huskies program. He is on pace to sign the best class since 2019 for this Washington Huskies program. And why is that so important? We go back to the conversations we had when Washington was trying to fill their head coaching vacancy. And one of the things we were first talking about was, can Washington bring in a coach that can maximize what this program can offer on the recruiting trail? You look at Kalen DeBoer's tenure at Washington, obviously a ton of success on the football field. He's a phenomenal coach when it comes to winning football games Saturday in the fall. One thing that we were very critical of with Kalen DeBoer was, what was he doing on the recruiting trail for this Washington program, where you're winning a ton of football games, you're competing at the highest level, you're putting a ton of guys to the NFL. I mean, Washington has so much to offer to these kids at the high school level, and the recruiting momentum never really seemed to follow. And so one of the biggest things we talked about was, can Washington go get a head coach that can maximize this team on the recruiting trail, which is just so important at the collegiate level, where you can have those flash seasons, but what does it take to consistently, year in, year out, compete for Big Ten and national championships? You got to get it done in the talent acquisition department. And I think Jedd Fisch has come in, again, without even coaching a snap, signing one of Washington's best classes in the last decade. That kind of tells you a little bit about what Jedd Fisch can do for this Washington program on the recruiting trail. We're going to talk about Dylan Robinson, but I also want to talk about the recruiting battle victories that we've seen Jedd Fisch have, and talk about what their strategy is in terms of filling this roster and making this roster a roster that can consistently compete at the top of the Big Ten. Fired up to get into the conversation. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Washington Husky fans. Y'all know it's been a blast talking this program. Some of you guys in the comments section have been saying we are sleeping on what Washington is doing on the recruiting trail. You guys are absolutely right. Not only are we sleeping, but everybody's sleeping. We're not sleeping anymore. There is a lot to talk about with this Washington program. Appreciate you guys checking us out. The Washington fans, you guys continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the boys. Means the world to us. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's first get into Dylan Robinson and then talk about what Washington has done on the recruiting trail. Now, you look at Dylan Robinson, again, it starts with, this is one of the athletes, that you just want to bet on. At 6'3", 190, could legitimately be an all Big Ten wide receiver, but also a very, very good cornerback at the next level. Now, me personally, I see him as a cornerback because you look at the length and how smooth of an operator that he is. He's a guy that can operate in press man coverage, put those long arms on wide receivers, run with wide receivers down the field. Then when that football is in the air, he's got tremendous ball skills, having an extensive background as a wide receiver as well. We always talk about what you look for in a cornerback is a guy that has the athleticism to match the freaky wide receivers that you're going to see at Oregon or you're going to see at Ohio State. I look at Dylan Robinson and say, he's one of those guys that can match what these wide receivers can do in the Big Ten. I think more importantly, you've seen Jedd Fisch have a ton of success with these long athletic cornerbacks going back to his time at Arizona. And so this guy seems like a perfect cornerback for this Washington defense to get to work with on the boundary. Big fan of Dylan Robinson and what he brings to this Washington defense from an athletic profile standpoint. But I think more importantly, we got to talk about what Washington is doing in the 2025 cycle, where there's a couple of things that I love. One, recruiting the state of Washington. That's something that Kalen DeBoer just, quite frankly, failed miserably at. A lot of the top kids from the state of Washington, where you have some really good football players in that state, were leaving to go out of state. That's where it's got to start. And we talk about this all the time. You have to be able to recruit your backyard. Jedd Fisch has done that. Two top players in the state of Washington are coming to play their football for the Washington Huskies. But I think secondly, you take a look at what they're doing in the state of California, and we've talked about this extensively. Lincoln Riley and USC kind of asleep at the wheel in terms of recruiting the state of California. And what have we seen not only Jedd Fisch do, but Dan Lanning as well? Go down to the state of California and take a ton of top prospects and bring them to the Pacific Northwest. You look at all the talent that you're going to see in the state of California. If USC is not going to recruit these kids hard, there's a ton of good football players that you can build your roster with and bring into Washington. You look at Dylan Robinson, one of the better players in the state of California, coming to Washington. You look at Chris Lawson, was a top target for Oregon, was a top target for USC, and a lot of SEC schools as well. You bring him to the state of Washington. Zadarius Rainey-Sale, a guy from the state of Washington, you had to go head-to-head with Florida State to get that one done. Vanderplug as well. There is so much talent in the state of California. You continue to scroll down this list and say, Jedd Fisch is doing a really nice job. You go to the state of Oregon, land their best player. I really do like Champ, one of the more physically imposing offensive linemen that you'll see in the West Coast. I think what Jedd Fisch is saying is, hey, we're going to make sure that we recruit our backyard. But if Lincoln Riley and USC is going to ignore a lot of the top kids in the state of California, we're going to go down into that state and start winning some of those recruiting battles. That's exactly what Jedd Fisch has done. We talk about this all the time. As a college football program, do you understand your blueprint? Do you understand where you can go win a lot of your recruiting battles? And you see a lot of programs not really stick to it, and they struggle to land kids at the high school level. You look at Jedd Fisch, he's being very selective in terms of, hey, where can we go win our recruiting battles? Where do we feel best about our chances with landing these top kids? And it's kind of evident. One, we're going to clean up our state. We're going to make sure the top kids in the state of Washington are playing for the Washington Huskies. And then we're going to go down into the state of California and start landing some of these top prospects as well. That's exactly what Jedd Fisch has done. So if there's two things to be excited about for this Washington program, one, Jedd Fisch is an elite football coach. I mean, he just won 10 games at Arizona, which is extremely impressive. That team went from a 1-win team to a 10-win team in 3 years. I mean, we know Jedd Fisch can coach winning football, similar to Kalen DeBoer. But I think more importantly, Jedd Fisch is showing that he can get it done on the recruiting trail as well. We talk about sustained success for college football programs. Those are the two pillars, right? You want coaches that can coach winning football and coaches that can get it done on the recruiting trail and understand how to get it done. I think Jedd Fisch is showing both. And again, he hasn't even coached a single snap for this Washington program. So if you're a Washington fan, what does it look like when Jedd Fisch starts winning some football games with this Washington program and then uses that momentum to get it done on the recruiting trail, something that Kalen DeBoer just could not do for the Washington Huskies? If you are a Washington fan, you are fired up, not only about Jedd Fisch winning football games, but what he's doing on the recruiting trail as well. A lot of exciting news coming out of this Washington program, a team that, hey, we feel kind of good can come in and win some football games in the Big Ten. This is a Washington program that has so much to offer. They can compete at the highest level. They just showed us that. They can put guys out into the NFL. They just showed us that. Jedd Fisch needs to use that on the recruiting trail. That's exactly what he's doing. We'll close it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.